Clinical supervision is often described as a space for learning, accountability, and professional growth. But what we sometimes overlook is that clinicians do not enter supervision or therapy without context. Each of us brings our own cultural frameworks, personal histories, and lived experiences into the work. So these are the things we have to take into consideration. Now, reflective supervision invites us to examine those influences, not as barriers, but as important sources of insight that shape how we listen, respond, and support the people we serve. Self-reflection and clinical supervision is a critical component of fostering professional development, self-awareness, and improvement. So what is reflective supervision? It's a structured environment where social workers can engage in self-reflection, enhancing their ability to critically analyze their practice and develop resilience. Using reflective writing, guiding dialogues, cultural self-assessment, group discussions, all to help better understand who we are as a profession. Reflective supervision can act as a parallel process. The same relational patterns, power dynamics, and questions of identity that show up in therapy can also emerge in supervision. This gives us space to notice and explore what comes up. It's the core of reflection. It's a core of supervision. Now, we can't talk about use of self without reflecting on culture. Discussions should explore the intersection of supervisees' identity and that of their clients, including race, ethnicity, skin tone, and the impacts of racism. Questions such as, how are your own cultural experiences influencing this case? As a first-generation Latina clinician, I have learned that the work of supervision is also the work of healing, of examining what we carry so that we can ethically witness trauma that might feel familiar. My hope is that the next generation of clinicians are given structured reflective space to grow in their own clinical voice. I have had to engage in deep introspection to sit with stories that echo my own, learning that witnessing loss, abuse, and trauma requires both courage and reflection. Supervision is therapeutic in nature, but not therapy. If issues do arise, it is recommended that some time be spent on the other side of the couch. When supervision intentionally integrates reflection, culture, use of self, it cultivates clinicians who are ethically grounded, culturally responsive, and relationally attuned, advancing equity in clinical practice. It sounds more like what was happening inside you and the client in that relationship. But in order to do this, supervisees must learn to identify where they fall within the therapeutic relationship in moments of engagement, withdrawal, activation, or discomfort, and examine these patterns critically. You're not going to like all your clients, but you are going to have to work with them. Transference reflects clients' relational expectations, shaped by prior experiences and sociocultural realities. It is a psychological and relational process in which a client unconsciously redirects feelings, expectations, and patterns from past relationships onto the therapist. It's normal and expected. But countertransference is a clinician's reaction to the client and is rooted in their own history and emotional triggers and cultural beliefs. All clinicians carry implicit biases and internalized beliefs shaped by family, community, media, and professional training. Supervision supports clinicians recognizing all these underlying aspects. These relational processes are always embedded within systems. Therapy and supervision are shaped by intersecting systems, either culture, race, gender, class, power, trauma, and organizational context. These forces influence perception, interpretation, and response. As clinicians learn about themselves, they must examine implicit biases, assumptions, and narratives that they may be holding on to. Reflective supervision provides space to surface and challenge these internalized frameworks and narratives. This is where supervision becomes intentional and leading to leadership. Especially in social work, supervision is where clinicians practice recognizing microaggressions, power dynamics, and systemic inequities that show up in clinical work. This deepens ethical decision-making and reduces harm. It allows supervisees to examine what they may be holding on to, including stereotypes. Leadership in supervision is enacted through modeling. It is easier to learn when you can see what it is supposed to look like, feel like, and allowing the space to process all that occurs in a therapy session. Supervisors model curiosity, not only about cases, but about identity, differences, and power. In all this, regulation also plays a central role. Supervisors' emotional regulation shapes the supervisory climate. A regulated, culturally attuned supervisor supports supervisees in tolerating discomfort when confronting biases and privilege. Not knowing or learning about yourself while helping others is by nature dysregulating. Non judgmental supervision minimizes shame, especially when exploring these biases or missteps. Growth requires accountability without humiliation, but growth is also sometimes painful. Learning, however, is not always uniform, as we recognize we have generational differences in the students we are teaching. As supervisors, we must keep in mind supervisees differ in these learning styles, cultural contexts, and generational norms around communication and feedback. Attuned supervision adapts without lowering standards, creating equitable pathways for accountability and growth. Generational differences influence communication, norms, feedback, expectations, even technology use, and conceptualization of authority. Supervision must remain developmentally responsive to all the generations that we provide services to and who we will teach. When supervision intentionally integrates reflection, culture, and use of self, it cultivates clinicians who are ethically grounded, culturally responsive, and relationally attuned, advancing equity in clinical practice. In all this, supervisors' use of self remains central, because how can we teach or model something we have not done ourselves?